Welcome to another edition of Right Voices. I'm John Hart, the co-founder of C3 Solutions, the Conservative Coalition for Climate Solutions, and I'm the editor of our news magazine, C3. And today we're honored to be joined by Matt Welch. He's a leading energy expert in Texas who serves as the state director for Conservative Texans for Energy Innovation. Matt, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, John. It's good to be with you.
Well, so Matt, Texas has been in the news because there was a major storm that happened in your state a couple of years ago, Winter Storm Uri, that left millions of people without power, and it tragically killed 246 people. So there's a debate about, I think, how the state's going to respond to that. But before we get into the details of it, which this can get really complicated really fast for people that don't follow energy policy or don't live in Texas. And there's a lot of issues at stake in terms of the reliability of the grid that apply to people all over the country. So maybe we can just give kind of viewers and listeners a chance to understand, how does energy work in Texas? How is it different? I know there's not one monolithic answer here, but Texas has some unique distinctives about energy policy and energy markets that set them apart.
That's true. We consider ourselves very unique, and there are three power grids in the country: East, West, and Texas. And so we like that. We have fought off FERC oversight successfully, and that's the way we want it. I think it's a holdover from our culture early on as another country, and it's an ethos from our founding. So we like our independence because we know we're unique. We appreciate providing our own leadership, and we just have an inherent distrust of all things federal, all things Washington, D.C., who try and regulate from a centralized bureaucracy in Washington. And we know that doesn't work for everybody. So we're doing it best we can in Texas, and right now it's working. We are at about year 26 of an experiment in a deregulated energy market. And what that means for about 75% of Texas is that you get to pick which retailer you want for your energy use and shop around for different products and different prices, much like you would for any other product. And those companies compete to offer the best product, whether it be the cheapest, whether it be time of use or whatnot. So that is competitive forces being brought to bear to Texans, and that's what drives costs down and makes it better for consumers. If they don't like the service they're getting from their energy provider, they simply disconnect and go sign up with a new one. It's easy. That's how it works. And so to back up, there's about 30% of Texans that aren't covered by that solution. They're in co-ops or munis that were part of a carve out when the deal was created about 25 years ago. Some of those governing entities are doing a good job, and some of them are not making progress that if you're a consumer that you would want to see. So we're giving encouragement whenever and wherever we can to those organizations to speed up the ball on bringing more competitive pressure to bear in their area of jurisdiction within Texas.
Right. So if a family or business, if you move from one state to Texas, most people who move will have the experience of, like you said, shopping. They'll actually get to choose, which is very different from the experience in most other states, where you really only have one. You have a de facto monopoly in most states.
Right.
No competition. And people just take that for granted. It's a little bit like in healthcare, there's a lot of anti-market forces we just take for granted, where there's a lack of price transparency that we would never tolerate. If you go on Amazon, you expect to see the prices of things. So that's a really important distinction, I think, in Texas that is exceptional. People actually have the opportunity to shop in most of the state.
It's a whole marketing tool called powertochoose.org. So if any of those folks you're talking to are in pulling their Ryder truck or their U-Haul across mid-America right now, and they're looking to move to Texas, and we know many of you are, thankfully, you're probably fleeing California or New York, New Jersey or others. Go to powertochoose.org and shop around for the best plan for your family and your business.
Yeah. So Matt, there's a debate obviously happening right now in the state of Texas that has big implications for really the future of energy in Texas, but the implications, it'll have a ripple effect really throughout the rest of the country. And there's the way I see it is, and tell me if you see it differently, but there's two paradigms in a lot of policy debates, and particularly energy. You can either have a top-down command and control model where bureaucrats and regulators essentially decide what is safe and what is good for everybody else, or you have a bottom-up system where you let innovators, entrepreneurs, customers really drive the bus and be the prime mover. It doesn't mean you're anti-government. It just means that Texas, a lot of things are big in Texas, but as our VP of Public Policy quips, Texans like their government small.
That is true. That is true. Let's get some bumper stickers made with that on it.
Yeah.
Well, government small, yes. Ego is big, yes. So you have to kind of reconcile those two. Without any humor whatsoever, Winter Storm Uri was a devastating disaster of epic proportions. I don't know if we'll ever see another situation like that in our lifetime. Hopefully we won't. And we are still suffering kind of an emotional aftermath of that storm. And then there's the physical toll of lives lost, as you mentioned. And then there's the we can't let it ever happen again effort. And so how do we build a solution that addresses the problem? Well, if you are kind of from our perspective, let's tackle that problem. If you are from the perspective of the Public Utility Commission of Texas, let's see if we can open that Pandora's box and roll back some progress and recapture some deregulated market.
Yeah, so, well, let me pause you there, because I think the way you've talked about this, I think is important in any policy debate. So, like, we both work for very esteemed senators. You work for Phil Gramm, I work for Tom Coburn, and they were both very skilled and adept at not only finding the right solution, but asking the right questions. And you've talked about the problem, and what was really the essence of the problem in that winter storm 2 years ago. What do people need to understand about that?
Well, sadly for conservatives such as myself, we had some leading conservatives out there right as the storm was still going on, spreading misinformation about what they thought the cause was. And I think through a very focused and concerted effort with CTEI and other groups, we gathered information from public sources and fought back against a narrative that was just misinformed and dangerous and just false. And
what was false about it? Just to put
false was that wind and solar were responsible for the power outages. Now, it's true that renewables went down for a portion of that period, but what every valid, thorough, credible research report and entity that has looked at this problem has concluded that the cause of the cascading disaster was energy supply from thermal energy sources, meaning natural gas could not get to where it needed to get to. And it exposed a vulnerability in the system that we weren't familiar with. We don't have that kind of a test on our grid. Frankly, we don't deal in winter weather to that degree very often. We deal in hot weather, not cold weather. And so people keep saying it's once in 100 years. I think it's even more than that. I don't think we're going to see probably snow and ice again, but when you can be inside your house and there's frost coming off your breath inside your house day after day, and you're beginning to wonder what you're going to do on day 6 or day 7, where you're going to go, it's a whole different paradigm. And you start to think about long term, it's a shock to the system. I know a lot of people, such as myself, went out and immediately invested in generators, backup generators, to be not caught off guard next time. And so it kind of created this ethos of, I need to be responsible for my own energy independence if and when that becomes, unfortunately, if it ever happens again. And so you kind of become, I don't want to say living off the grid, but you really have to pay attention to the grid. I can tell you that there was not a lot of people in Texas that knew what ERCOT meant before Winter Storm Uri.
And explain what that does mean. What is ERCOT?
The Electric Reliability Council of Texas, the governing board, kind of the air traffic controller of our energy grid, is how it's explained in common nomenclature. And so there have been probably some needed tune-ups and adjustments in governance and operations to that entity since the storm. We, of course, obviously revamped our Public Utility Commission of Texas, expanded that role. And what we're dealing with now is a reconstituted Public Utility Commission that is, in our opinion, going farther than they've been given permission to do so. And so what you're going to see now is the start of about a 4 or 5 month battle in the Texas legislature between the regulatory body and the legislative body. And right now, my money is on the legislative body.
And explain what those two philosophies are. How are they? What are the points of conflict and contention? In other words, and again, back to the problem. What problem are they each trying to solve, and are they seeing eye to eye on what the problem is?
They are absolutely not seeing eye to eye on the problem. The problem that the PUC is trying to solve is not the problem.
Explain again who the PUC is. What?
The Public Utility Commission of Texas is not addressing the root cause of the problem. They are going above and beyond and creating a product called a performance credit mechanism, PCM. We call it a predatory California-style monopolistic endeavor. The PCM, different definition. It will be catastrophic to renewable industry in Texas if it succeeds. I think kind of the defining traits of that new creation is that it has never been tried before anywhere. It is a sole creation of the Public Utility Commission of Texas. And in fact, the consultant hired by the PUC to study this issue recommended that they not use that route. It is extremely expensive, and it is untried, untested, and the independent market monitor, kind of the neutral party for all things electricity in Texas, the watchdog, if you will, has said that's just about the worst solution we could come up with. But for some unknown reason, at least known to the public, the PUC has ventured forth on this proposal known as the PCM, Performance Credit Mechanism. Now, the PUC will tell you they've been studying this idea for 18 months, right? But the PCM provision of this in specificity and in writing for the public to evaluate wasn't revealed until December of last year and voted on last week. So I don't call that a robust public policy debate. I called that a predetermined outcome of somebody who wanted it to go a certain way. And I think you're seeing some Texas legislators who recognize, thankfully, that it is the appropriate role of the legislature to oversee the regulatory body. And when that regulatory body steps outside of its lane, authorized by the legislature, they're going to get reined in.
And Matt, does it seem to you that the PUC is trying to fix what isn't broken?
They are trying to, So let me be clear. There are things and reforms that needed to have taken place. The general weatherization of important parts of the grid, interconnections. Those weatherization updates, I think, were recommended to be done about 8 years ago. And what we realized because of Winter Storm Uri is that by and large, they weren't done. And so the PUC came in and said, we're going to do those. You're going to do those, companies. We're going to require you to do them. And so there are some important, needed, helpful reforms that are being done, and there are more to come. But the PUC has gone off in a different direction by requiring this particular product that only benefits one source of energy generation to the detriment of others, primarily renewable energy.
Right.
So you would think that they would want to be technology agnostic, but they are clearly picking a winner and a loser.
Yeah. And why is that? Just there's a bias against renewable energy?
I think still there's an inherent bias. And one of the things that I don't think a lot of people have woken up to is the fact that in Texas, for whatever reason, a variety of reasons, our thermal generation resources have had failures at an inordinately high rate. And I get the report and I see this and I think, why are we continuing to allow this to happen? This is natural gas plants. This is what we count on, right? This is why the PUC says we can't do renewable because we got to rely on natural gas. And then we go through a serious winter spell or a serious storm event, and 30% of our natural gas goes out or offline. Mm-hmm. And I don't think people realize that our natural gas fleet has just as much problems in terms of reliability as they're criticizing renewables for. It just doesn't make sense in terms of an informed public debate. And I think the public's missing out. If you're representing the renewable energy industry, they have never represented that they're 24/7 immediately dispatchable, reliable source. They've never made that representation. They are a contributor, a low-cost contributor to the overall solution. And it shouldn't come as a shock to anybody that solar doesn't produce in the middle of the night. And there are certain weather patterns where the wind doesn't blow. And I don't think that should be a surprise to anybody. And if we're smart and technologically advanced, we can design a grid that accommodates for all those moving pieces and throw in battery storage in there too. And we can make it work if we have the willpower.
And so, Matt, I think what you're saying is the problem that Texas really should be solving for is weatherization and making sure the grid is resilient. So the problem is not deregulation. It's not that the weakness is not Texas's deregulated market. In fact, the fact that Texas has a deregulated market has contributed to lower cost of energy than most other states. I think Texas is in the top third in terms of the cheapest. Yep. It's about 34th most expensive, if my numbers are right.
Look, just follow.
California is the most expensive, except for.
I'm going back to my U-Haul and Ryder truck analogy. Just follow the foot traffic. Where are people moving for a variety of reasons? But Texas is a great place to raise a family and live for a variety of reasons. There is regulatory certainty for the most part. There is conservative leadership for the most part. It's kind of a good place to live for free market, free will individuals who want to have a hands-off government. And so people are voting with their feet to move to Texas for that very reason. I think our leadership early on a number of fronts, including the choice to go to a deregulated retail market, has led to a sustained period of lower prices for Texans and their ability to pick and choose their energy choice and force that competition at the retail level. I think, honestly, what we need to talk about in the not too distant future is bringing that competition to bear at the wholesale level. We do have some generators at the wholesale level, but if I told you there were 4 or 5 of them and they're extremely powerful, that might not be a competitive market. Some might say that's a monopoly. And so there are some companies taking advantage of the small number of players in the power generation market. And we need to keep an eye on that because you can rest assured that the company is looking at their bottom line. They're not looking at your checkbook. on how you're going to balance your check, your bank account,
Right.
when these utility bills keep going higher and higher. And let me say also that there's something overarching that we need to keep an eye on, and that is we've got to build more transmission in Texas. It is key to our growth. There's a statistic out there, I can't quite remember what it is, about the number of people moving to Texas every year, maybe 50 or 100,000. The amount of energy demand grows every year exponentially. We've got to build more transmission to keep up with our growth.
Yeah.
The generation companies, they might not want us to build more transmission because that impedes their market share. They like that control. They don't like distributed energy. They don't want to surrender that pie. And so there's that conflict there about doing what's right or doing what's best for your bottom line. And so we are vigilant in that regard.
Yeah, I think, Matt, one thing that's really fascinating about this debate is that here we are, two conservatives who work for very esteemed, notable conservative senators, and we're really making the case for renewable. It's conservatives who have come along each other and help you all in Texas make sure renewables have an opportunity to compete, because we believe in what we call the all of the above energy strategy, where government shouldn't pick winners and losers. And when government tries to make those choices, they end up subsidizing losers and punishing and regulating winners typically. And so, and you've quipped, it's kind of the all of the above, but also below, because Texas has a big geothermal capacity. Do you want to describe what that means and the promise that?
I would love to. In fact, yesterday, John, the University of Texas, along with some other organizations who have been working on a benchmark research report for the last 18 months, publicly released their report on the future of geothermal energy in Texas. And, Texas has been blessed with a number of natural resources. We are fortunate to be at the epicenter of a lot of wind, solar, natural gas, oil. But guess what? We are also on top of a tremendous resource of geothermal energy. And it is abundant. And where we are now is making that technological breakthrough to go down to the depth that we need. And it's not that far from where we drill now. But the good news is that we are using the oil and gas industry as a bridge through their technology and their workforce. They drill wells all day long, every day. That's their job. We're using their technology breakthroughs, their research and development, to refine that process and make a better, fancier drill bit to go deeper and more efficiently down and harvest that geothermal energy. And for a state like Texas that has a reliability challenge in producing energy, the ability to drop in a geothermal well whenever and wherever, but they call it geothermal anywhere is kind of the moniker.
Right.
It's a tremendous problem solver for our challenges. Now, it's not going to happen tomorrow, but there are a number of pilot projects in Texas right now where there will be breakthroughs this year, project announcements this year. And at the planning stages, I have had a number of meetings in the last week with a number of startups who have tremendous financial commitments to make incredible progress in Texas. It's just phenomenal. And Texas is on the forefront of this, and I couldn't be happier that conservatives are a part of that mix. And we have conservative leadership in the Texas legislature that has recognized that this energy source is a great solution for, it's not a cure-all, but it's a part of the mix for our energy resource challenges and can help contribute to the grid stability. And so we're off and running.
So
all of the above and below.
Above and below. That's another good bumper sticker. Yeah. And another, describe the promise of what I think they're called virtual power plants. And they're becoming a topic of debate and discussion in Texas. Describe what those are.
Sure. So virtual power plants are kind of a fairly new concept. And in Texas, there was a kind of a formal docket procedure whereby ERCOT and the PUC kind of launched a pilot project. And what I'm talking about is people who have a battery wall in their house, and Tesla was the leader in this pilot project in terms of getting it passed. If you produce excess energy on that power wall, you will have the ability to sell it back to the grid at hopefully a competitive price. Right now, there are jurisdictions in Texas where you can sell it back, but that utility controls the price. Not much of a market if they can dictate the price, and they don't have to buy it if they don't want to. So, but we're talking about energy entrepreneurs. Every household in Texas could become energy entrepreneurs and make a whole new revenue stream by producing excess energy. And guess what? The grid needs all the energy it can get. And so if we have little, inputs from every consumer, that in the aggregate will take care of our challenges, to be honest, while putting money in the pockets of everyday Texans. It's a beautiful solution. And I believe the pilot project is oversubscribed and it's already exceeded expectations. And so we're eager to move it on to full deployment. And I just want to salute Tesla's leadership in that, and Octopus Energy for moving the ball forward on these types of concepts. Because
just, go ahead.
It's the private sector where innovation and solution and leadership take place. It does not rest within government or with government agencies to make this kind of progress. They have to step forward with kind of these turnkey solutions. And in this case, Tesla has done yeoman's work in making it happen. So we were proud to offer written comments in support of that proposal.
Yeah, and does the grid have the capacity to carry that energy and distribute it, or do upgrades need to be made to fully realize?
There will be a need for some engineering advancements to handle this type of addition to the grid, but I think that's a problem that frankly we can handle, and we should handle. And it's just a way. It is the wave of the future in terms of our natural growth, is to expand the current system. We're not lighting our houses with whale oil anymore, right? So, I mean, we make progress and we move forward. We make advancements, and this is an exciting one where people can get in on the. Why are we going to let one giant power company in Houston, Texas, make all the money off power generation? You invested in a power wall at great personal expense. You are meeting the needs of your energy consumption at your house. Why in the world would you not want to make more money and contribute your excess power to the grid? It's a perfect solution. And I have to give props to ERCOT and the PUC when they do things right. This was forward thinking. Now I would, of course, we wanted the pilot project to be larger in terms of megawatts. I'm not even sure what the cap was, but it was woefully small. It's already been exceeded. But that just tells you there's a demand for this kind of entrepreneurship. And stay tuned for more exciting things.
Well, I think one question I'm going to kind of end with is agriculture. So Matt, you may know that I've got a 62-acre farm. I'm in Maryland. It's a very different state, different politics, different geography than Texas. But the reason what's happening in Texas matters a lot for the rest of the country is one of the challenges in Maryland, and this is true in all states, but Mid-Atlantic states, where we don't have large farms like you do in Texas typically. The average size farm, the median size is about 56 acres in Maryland. The average size is more; it's about 160, but that's dwarfed from Texas. Right? If people watch, Yellowstone, they see the huge thousands of acre ranches. But one of the things that I've wanted to do on my land, and farmers are trying to do all over the country, is do what's called solar grazing, where you can. The dilemma that we face is people that believe in wanting to have diversify. It's a smart business decision as a farmer, is to diversify and make the most of your scarce resource, which is your land and your time. So to combine having animals like sheep with solar is something that Texas is pioneered, and we're trying to apply it in different states. So again, it just sort of people stereotype and think they understand what energy environment issues are about, but really it's conservatives who are leading the way and pioneering some of these solutions. But in Texas, you've got to have a way, if somebody wants to do a large operation and combined renewable energy with agriculture, you have to deliver that power. And my limitation where I live is, even if I could generate that power, there's nowhere to take it. And so that's why this debate matters so much, not just for Texas, but the rest of the country.
I'm sure people in Maryland and other parts of the country get tired of me bragging on Texas, but I can't help it. It's my job. It's just so easy sometimes. But it comes back to our ethos. We have a very fundamental respect for private property rights. And so that was kind of built in early on. And so it's fundamental to our governance and our operation. And so it has created generations of land stewards, and there's stewardship built into education, and just that's the way people grow up, is taking care of their land, and it's passed on from generation to generation.
Yeah, to make things better off than you found it. That's
exactly. And so there, I see other stories. I see stories in other parts of the country about challenges to siting of wind farms and solar farms and whatnot. And I recognize and see that, I guess, local townships and boards can prohibit those types of projects. But in Texas, because private property rights are paramount, there's not a damn thing a city council, a county commission, or a school board can do if a farmer or rancher wants to put a utility scale solar or wind farm on his property. The only leverage comes if that government entity wants to grant a tax abatement to make the deal sweeter. That's where the negotiation comes in. I know for a fact that farming and ranching is very compatible with renewable energy. We have folks within our organization who are involved every day in ranching, and they like to say they struck wind, and they are earning money to guarantee the future of their family's legacy. In a particular instance in West Texas, this is a ranch that has been in one family for about 140 years. And I think they're on their 7th generation of stewards now. They're able to use the money through that partnership with a renewable energy company to develop new cattle breeds for sale at market. They're even using the money to develop probably one of the only electric vehicle charging stations within 100 miles. So they are forward thinking. Now, you and I know that there's not going to be a lot of electric vehicles in that part of Texas, but if you're one of those people who own one, you're darn sure going to want to stop at this electric vehicle charging station in Menard, Texas, when it becomes operational soon. And it'll be on your map, I'm sure. And I know that solar is very compatible. Utility scale solar absolutely is. And you're right about sheep. Goats, not so much. Goats will jump on the panels and they'll chew the cables. But people say that, if you do a solar farm, it takes stuff out of agricultural production. Well, if you ask the landowner who was the farmer, he's like, I've lost money the last 4 years on crops that have gotten ruined or went bad, or it was a bad, whatever, drought, you name it. And he said, this is somebody who's bringing me a guaranteed revenue of certainty for the next 30 years. And maybe I can keep farming on one half of my farm and dedicate the other half to solar and take the money I make from solar to keep the farming going and make it even a better farm. And so I don't know why we would want to deprive that family farmer of creating a situation that works for him and his family. I just don't understand why people think that's not a winning solution. And the fact that it's producing clean energy and contributing to the grid is just a blessing that seems to get lost in the debate.
Yeah, and that's important because part of the stakes in this, again, it isn't just abstract economic concepts. It's people's way of life and preserving traditions that are incredibly valuable for communities, for our state, whether you're in Texas, whether you're in Maryland. So I commend you for fighting that fight and defending.
Well, we got a partner organization in Texas, wonderful group of folks called the Texas Land and Liberty Coalition, and they're covering Texas best they can every day out in the hinterlands, meeting with county judges and rural school districts and 4-H clubs and talking the talk and spreading the good word and sharing examples of how to do partnerships right that are constructive for the community. And look, the economic impact is phenomenal for rural Texas. You know, we used to say that small towns used to beg for a Walmart to come to town. That was like the saving grace. If we could just get a Walmart come to town, our economic woes would be solved. And if Walmart didn't happen, that small town probably withered on the vine. It was kind of like a railroad stop back in the 1800s. Well, when a utility scale developer decides to put a project in your county, it overnight becomes the largest taxpayer and has a minimal impact on kind of the community ethos. We're not bringing a lot of jobs. We're not bringing a whole burden to the school district in terms of new population. There's not a lot of critical infrastructure drain. And the stuff you can do with those dollars is phenomenal. You can build new hospitals. You can build new roads. You can pay for new sheriffs or new ambulances or new community colleges. It's just, it's an absolute win-win. And there are some folks who don't quite get it. And there are some folks who are being misled by less than honorable people in this whole debate. So that's what we like to do, is set the record straight whenever and wherever we can.
Well, Matt, I appreciate your time. And again, this has been Right Voices with John Hart. You can follow us at c3newsmag.com. And Matt Welch, he's the State Director of Conservative Texans for Energy Innovation. We'll be following this debate closely, and look forward to having you on again, hopefully, as we move along with this discussion in Texas.
Thanks, John.